Hello everyone and welcome to another incredible game from round 3 of this year's FIDE World Cup. It is Praggnanandhaa versus Navara, #1 Czech Grandmaster, and well, if you had to choose one of them to win this, it would be very hard to do so because Praggnanandhaa is incredible, but he is very young and he is even higher rated. He's one rating point higher rated than Navara, but for those of you who know Navara know that he's an exceptional Grandmaster. He has so much experience and well, it could be just anyone's match and anyone's game. This is the first game of the match we'll be showing. Praggnanandhaa defeated very strong French Grandmaster Maxime Lagarde to qualify into round 3. He skipped round 1 because he is in the top 50, and everyone who is in the top 50 in the FIDE World Cups is seeded directly into round 2, and so has Navara. He skipped round 1. In round 2 he defeated Niklas Huschenbeth of Germany, and now they face each other. So let's check it out. And in case you're wondering why I'm using my old setup instead of the new one, I'm traveling for a couple of days now. I'm using my laptop and I forgot to upload the new interface. I know it's a silly mistake, but what are you gonna do? So let's check it out. Pragg has the white pieces and he opens with pawn to e4. Sorry about that. We have pawn to e5 by David, knight to f3, knight to c6, and now bishop to c4. We have bishop to c5, and of course I know what you guys are wondering, but no, it was not played. Here we have pawn to d3 by Pragg, the main line of the Giuoco Pianissimo. We have knight to f6, and now there are so many moves you can play here. c3 the top move, then you can castle, knight to c3 is a move, bishop to g5 is a move. Any move is a move here, but Pragg plays pawn to a4. It's actually the 10th most popular move in this position. And okay, you don't go for the evans, but you are trying very hard to surprise your opponent and catch him off guard. So a4, and Navara goes for pawn to h6. We have castles and now pawn to d6. There is a game where castles was played, but pawn to d6 is a new move. So already as of move 6 we have a completely new game. Imagine that. We have bishop to e3 now, challenging the bishop here, and we have a trade. Captures. This gives Pragg the semi-open f-file for his rook, but it also gives him a doubled e-pawn. We have castles and pawn to h3 now, hindering the development of the dark square bishop. We have bishop to e6, and now a similar trade to the dark square bishops. Bishop captures on e6 and pawn captures, creating a very, very symmetrical setup. We have pawn to c3, and now pawn to d5. Your opponent didn't prevent it, so you might as well strike in the center. We have knight b to d2, pawn to a5 now, stopping b4 as one always should, and now queen to b3, putting pressure on the b7 pawn, but it's not really a pawn you care about, so queen to d6. Of course, none of you are thinking about capturing the pawn. If you capture the pawn, rook f to b8 traps the white queen, so I know none of you were considering that. So e captures on d5, we have queen captures, offering a queen trade, and while Pragg does want to trade, he wants to trade on his own terms, so he plays pawn to e4. Now, inviting queen captures on b3, you could also play queen captures on d3, and it kind of looks great because you, well, sort of mess up a white strong center, but then comes rook a to e1, and white just has a whole lot of development for this pawn, and, well, obviously Pragg prepared it, so David did not want to go into this. And the engine agrees with David. The engine says, okay, you could capture on d3, but maybe capturing on b3 is the way to go. So he does. Queen captures on b3, knight captures, and now pawn to b6, not allowing the knight any squares from b3. King to f2. The queens are off the board, and now the king belongs on e3 to guard the d3 pawn. We have rook a to d8, and now rook a to d1. Rook to f7. With ideas of maybe doubling up on the f-file or on the d-file. We have king to e3 and now knight to h5. We have rook to f2. You know, the knight might come to g3, so the rook on f1 is definitely a liability. Knight to f4, and now you want to kick away the knight with g3, but then the h-pawn would hang, so pawn to h3. We have king to f8, and now pawn to g3, and knight back to h5. Interestingly, you could even play knight to h3. It's such a silly square to put the knight on, because it kind of gets trapped after rook to h2, but look at this, pawn to g5, and now if you capture the knight, then g4 attacks the rook and the knight here. Problem is, although this looks very nice, the problem is captures, obviously knight captures on g5, and now after knight captures and h captures, you can just play rook d to h1, double up on the h-file, and white gets a better position with black not really gaining anything for his fancy moves. So knight to h5 instead. Going back, we have rook to g1 defending the g3 pawn, and king to e7. Navara just centralizes his queen. We have knight to e1, and now rook captures on f2. So a pair of rooks gets traded off the board. Rook captures, king captures. Luckily, your knight is guarding the d3 pawn. And now knight back to b8, remaneuvering the knight. We have king to e3 and now knight to d7. So there are 4 knights still in the game. Obviously, there will be a lot of horsing around. Knight to f3, we have knight h to f6 and now pawn to g4, preparing pawn to g5. So knight to e8 and of course pawn to h5 now. Really taking control over those light squares, and you might have some ideas of knight to h4, knight to g6. It's going to be an excellent square for the knight. So knight to d6, we have knight b to d2, and rook to g8. We have knight to h4, now eyeing that g6 square, but of course David does not allow that. Knight to f8, and here we have sort of a repetition. Knight h to f3, knight to d7, Pragg goes back, David goes back, Pragg goes back, but not now, because if you went back you would have a threefold repetition, and it would be a draw. And since Pragg only gets the white pieces once, next time he's going to be black against David, he wants this game to continue. Rook to f1, and now pawn to g5, squeeze the position as much as possible. So now David is saying, all right, you either move the knight or you capture en passant. There's really nothing else to consider, and if you go back, then I no longer have to worry about you infiltrating anywhere on the king side. So Pragg does capture en passant, h captures on g6, knight captures, and now he just goes back, knight h to f3. We have rook to h8, now preparing to, the breakthrough, and then you've pretty much taken care of the king side completely. Rook to h1, and now king to f6. We have rook to h5, putting pressure on the d5 pawn, but it is very nicely defended, so you don't have to worry. Knight to f7, and now knight to c4, adding even more pressure to this pawn, but again, it's defended 3 times, so you don't have to worry. Rook to d8, now puts pressure on the d pawn. If the king ever moves, you're going to capture it, and now comes rook to h2. Sort of maybe with an idea of going rook to d2, maybe advancing the d pawn, but then you weaken the e4 pawn, and you just give black the opportunity to undouble his pawn. So basically, Pragg does not have a move here. He can play b3, it's a useful move, and also maybe rook h5, rook h2, rook h5, rook h2. It's hard to find a viable plan here for white. Unless David makes a mistake, and that's exactly what happened here. He played knight to g5, he offered a trade of knights, and the problem is this move completely loses the game. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Pragg while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this brilliant maneuver, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight f captures on e5. That's the good stuff. Even though the square is defended twice, doesn't really matter. And for those of you who were wondering what about rook captures on h6, not the best, because knight captures on f3, king captures, and now just king g7 attacking the rook, and also your d3 pawn is still hanging. So that's the problem. You're going to defend the rook, but then rook captures on d3 with check. Equal material, black rook is very active. This is a draw at least. So instead, knight f captures on e5, and now look at this. Knight captures on e5, and now rook to f2 with check. That's the move. The problem again with rook captures on h6 is this knight on g5. It almost works. If you were wondering, king g7, knight captures on e5, king captures, and now if knight to f7 forks the king and the queen, you know, it forks the king, the rook, and the knight. It's like the meme, and then it goes like, and the knight. But okay, knight captures on e5, we have rook to f2 with check, knight e to f3 now blocking, and of course you don't just give up the rook for 2 knights, you just attack the knight one more time. Knight to d2, rook to g8, and now you just trade everything off, and you're up a clean pawn. Knight captures, rook captures with check, king to g5, and now rook to f7, offering to trade the g pawn for the c7 pawn. And okay, you could decide to go one way or the other, but both ideas are lost for black, so it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to quickly show what happens if you capture on g4, rook captures on c7, and now, okay, let's say you start advancing the pawn. It looks like, okay, how are you ever stopping this pawn? Well, you don't. That's the point. Rook c6, you're going to create your own passed pawns. Rook captures on h6, h3, rook to h6, and once you advance the pawn, you will start advance your own pawns. h2, d5, and now finally, after king to g2, you're gonna capture it. Rook captures on h2, or wait until it gets promoted. Doesn't really matter. King captures e5, and the 2 connected pass pawns will overpower the lonely rook here. The king is far too behind to help out with that. So after rook to f7, c5 was played. not allowing rook captures on c7, but again, it doesn't matter. Rook to b7, we have king captures on g4 now, and rook captures on b6. We have pawn to h5, the passed pawn now starts marching forward. Rook captures on h6, on e6, pawn to h4, rook to h6, we have pawn to h3, and now pawn to e5. And now we have rook to b8. If you go for king to g3 and try to promote the pawn, then it's the same idea. We just sacrifice the rook and everything is the same. So rook to b8 was played, but now king to e4. We have rook captures on b2, pawn to e6, and now rook to e2 with check. King to d5, now you're going to eliminate the c5 pawn, and then you have 3 connected passed pawns in the middle of the board. Rook e3, and now even pawn to d4. Giving up the c3 pawn, rook captures, now you're going to undouble your pawns, but it doesn't, no, not undouble, but break up your pawns, but it doesn't really matter. Rook to d3 check was played, king to c4, and now rook to e3. Pawn to c6 now. We have king to g5 attacking the rook, but now pawn to c7, offering a rook for the ability to queen on c8, but of course you don't do this. So rook to e1 was played, trying to pick up the pawn with rook to c1 check, followed by rook captures on c7, but now comes rook captures on h3, and it was in this position on move 60 that David Navara resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Next move, Pragg will get a queen into the game, and also if you give a check, then rook to c3 just blocks check. There's no way to get to the c7 pawn. Next move, Pragg gets a queen, and that's pretty much it. So absolutely incredible by Pragg. It was a very tough game, but Pragg took that one opportunity that that Navara gave him. Like I said, there's really not much to do here. You can play b3. That's a useful move. If you can prepare d4, who knows? But basically, just repeating is what you would do. Probably Pragg wouldn't repeat. He would find some way to continue the game. He has the white pieces. He wants to push on. How he would do it, I have no idea, but he managed to trick David here. He went for the pawn, and that's pretty much it. Very tricky stuff by Pragg. In game 2 of their match, it was a draw. It was a very crazy game. David went for the attack. Pragg retaliated by also going for the attack. It was a pretty crazy game, ended in a draw, which means Praggnanandhaa goes into the next round. So now we go into the final 32. So 16 pairs of players. These are the pairs. I'm sure you guys are interested who is playing against who, so let's check it out. Magnus will be facing Vincent Keimer, Vahab Sanal will be facing Vasily Ivanchuk, Svan Erasmus will be facing Wang Hao, Gukesh will be facing Andrei Yesipenko, it will be Svidler against Abasov, Salin Saleh versus Vocaturo, Vidit versus Bakro, Nepomniachtchi versus Nihal Sarin, Robson versus Caruana, Duda versus Maksudlu, Wojtaszek versus Dominguez, Wesley So versus Alexis Sarana, Grandelius versus Latasha Santos, we have Sindarov versus Arjun Irgisi, Berkesh versus Ponomariov, and Nakamura will be facing Praggnanandhaa. So after this very tough match against David Navara, Pragg goes on to face the speed demon himself, Hikaru Nakamura. So yeah, that's the game. Really hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Erin is the best wife. No, Laura is the best wife. Corinne is the best wife in the entire universe, period. Yoon Young and Mustafa Mirza for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on this wonderful event until it finishes. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. Remember, today is a rest day. No games will be played in the World Cup, so if you have any other suggestions, do let me know in the comments. See you soon.